you walk into a typical supermarket in the UK, you'll see hundreds or even thousands of products in single-use packaging, from fruit and veg to pasta and bread. As a result, reusable packaging systems offer one of the most effective routes to tackling waste and pollution. Hello, and welcome to the Circular Economy Show. I'm your host Finn, and in today's episode, I spoke to Catherine Conway from GoUnpackaged. As part of their work with the Refill Coalition, GoUnpackaged are on a mission to revolutionise the way we transport items from supermarkets to our kitchens. I started by asking Catherine, what is the Refill Coalition?
The Refill Coalition is a coalition of retailers and supply chain experts in the UK. GoUnpackaged convened it in 2020 as a way of getting everybody to work together to develop a standardised solution for both in-store refill and online consumer returnables.
You've gained attention recently for your work with Aldi and Ocado. We're going to get a little bit more into those products as we go on, but could we start with Aldi? What sort of work are you doing with those guys?
So there's two parts to the project. One is the Aldi part, which is in-store refill. So customers are able to currently go to 2 trial Aldi stores to test out a new version of in-store refill that's fit for a supply chain. And then the Ocado version is an online consumer returnables project where consumers will get pre-filled mini bulk containers delivered to their home, which they'll then use and hand back to the driver.
And can you tell us a bit more about the returnables model that Ocado is due to launch?
Certainly can. So Ocado have been part of the Refill Coalition since the start because they really wanted to develop an industry standard rather than just a solution for themselves. The consumer returnable is, we call it mini bulk. So it's a 3.3 litre, similar to the vessel that we've got, similar materials, similar aperture, so it can be filled and washed in the same way. And the consumer will receive it as part of their normal delivery, use the product, and then return it to the driver. And it's just going to be really interesting to see whether that added level of convenience really helps with the returns. It's going to be interesting to see the role of deposits or not putting deposits on the return rates. So we're going to be testing lots of different parts of consumer returnables.
So of EMS4 reuse models, you're covering 2 there with your work with Aldi and Ocado. Thinking about the Aldi product, why did you start with dry goods?
When you're talking about in-store refill, you obviously need products that can flow because consumers are bringing a container down to some sort of dispenser and filling up. So I guess the easiest products to start with are kind of dry ambient. We're also working on a liquid solution, though, which will then really open up a lot of other product categories. So in Aldi, we started with cereal products. So we've got 6 cereal products, but really it's just as applicable to any free-flowing dry goods. So that could be cereals, pulses, pastas, rices, sweets, confectionery, all those kind of products.
Yeah, I mean, my next question was, are there other product categories that this is suited for? But I guess you've sort of answered to that one. So let's talk about the design then. What's crucial in the design to make that work?
So the way in-store refill has always been done is there is some sort of hopper with some sort of dispenser on it that a customer is pulling a handle down and filling up the amount of product that they want. Traditionally, that has been one unit, and effectively these shop staff have to take the dispensers apart, clean them by hand, fill them up using bulk sacks. And there's sort of 3 huge problems with that. Firstly, it's adding a huge amount of cost into the system. Secondly, like big supermarkets are just not set up to do that. They've had to add these clean rooms in at the back at vast expense. And also it's not zero waste because if something comes in a 25 kilo sack, okay, it's coming in bulk packaging, but it's still single-use packaging. So our aim with this was to say, if we wanted something that could be available in every single retailer across the globe, how would it have to work? And it's obvious that we have to take all of that manual labor out of store level and do it up in the supply chain, and exactly how it works at the minute with single-use packaging where you pack in a factory. So we redesigned that hopper effectively into a sort of modular system where we call it the vessel. So it's a 14.4 litre HDP vessel that is effectively a big sort of bulk beer keg style. And that powers the whole system. It's filled by the manufacturer, comes out through the supply chain like any other single-use product. And then in store, all they've got to do is screw on the dispenser head, where the customer can dispense from. And then the key bit is when it's empty, the store staff just put it out the back, gets picked up with all of the returns, whether that's cardboard packaging, things going back to the distribution centres, and then can go into a washing and a cleaning loop before being returned empty back to the supplier for refilling. So it takes up all of that single-use packaging up the supply chain. And then when customers come with their own containers to fill up, then they're taking out single-use packaging there. So you can get an end-to-end single-use free supply chain.
So as we know, supply chains are set up for single use currently. So just wondering, what have been the challenges for sort of remodeling and rethinking that supply chain?
So many challenges because, as you say, the whole system is set up so that single use functions. I think from a design perspective, we had to meet a lot of different parts of the supply chain's needs. So we ran a collaborative process with all of our partners. We've got some really brilliant equipment partners in the project. So that's Digi, Trade Fixtures, Eden, Berry. So we've got all of these companies who traditionally work in a sort of single-use environment, bringing their capabilities to designing reuse. And across it, we had to work out, right, what does the customer need in store? What does the member of staff need back of house? What does a supplier need when they come to fill it? At the minute, we're only in a trial, so obviously everything's being filled manually. But we're trying to imagine something that you can update an automated filling line to work for. So I think a huge design challenge was trying to meet everybody's needs enough that the system functions without, compromising on some real essentials. So things like wide apertures for both easy filling and easy cleaning, flat bottoms so things can be placed down, handles so that the store staff can lift them easily. So there's a lot of design considerations in that. And then we brought in sort of two other pieces of analysis to that design process, one of which was some commercial modelling. So we have an end-to-end supply chain analytic tool where we can model out all of the activities in a given system. So you can actually model out all of the activities in a single use system and compare them against this, fictional reuse system that you're developing. And it will actually show you where the cost savings can be. And that's been a really interesting process because I think lots of us think that reuse is important just from a sustainability perspective. Of course, we need to reduce virgin plastics. Of course, we need to reduce our consumption. Actually, if you design things well, you can save costs, and that becomes far more attractive to a retailer than something that, or a brand, than something that they think is just going to cost them lots of money. Of course, implementing any new system is going to cost money, but a lot of our results show that at scale, we will be able to deliver products in bulk at a cheaper price across the supply chain than the single-use alternative.
And I think you've touched on it there about, using the sort of expertise of the industry to make these things more durable, more, better quality. And I think, like you said, knowledge transfer is a huge part of that. On that topic, we know that your business model is open source. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how that works?
Yeah, so this is the sort of hypothesis that we had when we set up the Refill Coalition. So the Refill Coalition is, one element of what we do at GoUnpackaged. But with this specific use case, we are trying to get to, I guess, our mission. We're a mission-driven organization, which is how do we really hit scale with reuse and refill? And I don't think, we were a startup and we had created this wonderful new system. I honestly don't think that even with being the best startup in the world, we can go and sell one system to every retailer or every global FMCG brand across the globe to try and get everyone to use the same system. So instead, we thought, well, what are the bits that do need to be standardized? And that's what we're working on at the minute. And how might we make those standards available so that anyone can use it? And so every partner that came into the solution, yes, of course, the equipment partners own their IP on their particular part of the system. But anyone who wants to enter this system from next year, once the trial is finished, will be able to get the spec of how the system works. And if you've got a company that makes I don't know, some amazing valve that increases shelf life by 6 months. Well, you can just work out how to make your valve fit in with the system that's been designed. And then it's your job to come in and sell it into part of the system. So I think some other people would call it a platform. I don't know if I particularly love the term platform in this sense, but we're really trying to create this ecosystem where existing businesses who exist within the supply chain already, globally, we've got brilliant packers, packaging manufacturers, designers, converters. Everybody's got all of these capabilities already. What we're trying to do is say, come and turn those capabilities to making reusable packaging instead of single-use packaging.
As Catherine alluded to, the knowledge is already there. It is only through collaboration and collective effort that we will see the kind of progress that is required. After learning about the Refill Coalition and their mission, Catherine's passion for scaling reuse and return is clear. So I wanted to go back to the start and unpack what it was that caught her attention initially.
In a long time.
Yeah.
So I guess there have been sort of 3 key phases to what is now GoUnpackaged. So the first was just me. I set up the first kind of modern zero waste store, really because I, as a consumer, was getting really frustrated with the amount of packaging that I was bringing home. And so I used to shop in a health food shop, and I used to always refill Ecover products, but I could never refill anything else. And I very clearly remember one day going, well, why isn't there a shop where everything's refillable? So I got some funding. I set up a market stall. I had 2 market stalls. I had an independent shop. I had a second shop. And I was probably young and naive and thought that I was going to somehow save the world with my chain of independent shops. And it was hard. There was a global, the financial crash happened. So I set up in 2006, I think. So it was hard going being a small independent business on the high street, in the same way that lots of zero waste shops are struggling now in a cost of living crisis. So from having thought that I didn't necessarily want to work with supermarkets, it became very obvious that I needed to go and work with the place where most of the packaging, single-use packaging, was coming from. And I think it's 98% of people shop in supermarkets in the UK. So the next phase was I started working with Planet Organic. So we still do have unpackaged concessions within Planet Organic stores. So they are a chain of an independent chain of organic stores in London. And that really gave me an understanding of how you work in someone else's business. From then, we moved on to, I guess, the original Waitrose project, the Waitrose Unpacked project, where I started working with colleagues who are now my fellow directors at GoUnpackaged, where we really started to look at what this scale up might look like. So then we've worked with most of the major retailers in the UK on lots of the reuse trials. And then finally, I think as of last year, we thought, right, well, we're ready for a rebrand. So we kind of became GoUnpackaged with sort of 3 key areas. We develop solutions, of which the Refill Coalition is a really great example. We do straight consultancy for any business that's wanting to transition from single use to reuse across any of the 4 kind of EMF reuse models. And then we do policy work as well. So the way we understand it is business and government need to work hand in hand. We need policy incentives to get business to move, and business needs to give the right signals to government that it's open to policy and regulation. So I guess those are the sort of 3 areas, and really just trying to work on really kind of high impact projects now. And in our mind, that's about coalitions, it's about collaboration, it's about getting businesses in certain sectors to work together and pool resources and share risk to get a better result than if they tried to do it individually.
From a market stall in London, and now today, 10 years later, advising businesses all around the world. But as we know, action is required at all levels, and high return rates are key. So how do we encourage people to return?
So I think at the minute, our problem isn't really a lack of consumer demand, it's a lack of availability. So you have to be a certain type of consumer, well, certainly in the UK, to be able to remember what it was like to have glass milk bottles delivered to your door, or Corona pop bottles. I mean, that's about the 2 best, or even pick and mix in a Woolworths when you were a child going to the cinema. Those are the 3 best examples of reuse and refill I can think of. Now, obviously in Germany and Mexico, you've got whole beer bottle systems and everything like that. But we've lost the cultural memory of refilling because we have made single use so convenient. So even if you were a very dedicated sort of mainstream shopper in the UK, I think you'd have to live near one of about 12 stores of any of the major retailers to be able to even engage with reuse. So I think we need to be careful that we are not confusing a lack of consumer demand with a lack of availability. People can't ask for something that they don't understand and they don't know what it is. So there's an onus on business to actually really go out there and lead and put things out there. Then when it comes to the consumer experiences, we have to really think about it. So my colleague Helen works a lot on all of our consumer behavior change work. And we have to get the right balance. We have to make it attractive. We have to make it at the right price point. You know, it can't be more expensive to do more work as you're a consumer. And I believe we have to explain it to people. We have to tell them what we're doing. So in our refill station in Aldi, we have this little animation that actually shows the whole story of the vessel to explain it to people. So I think there's lots and lots of carrots we can do with making reuse and refill attractive. I then also wonder at what point we need the stick, as it were, and we actually take some of the single use off sale. Because I think people will actually shift. We've seen with the pandemic, people shift their behavior very quickly when they need to. We've seen it with reusable cups at festivals and events. You know, people are absolutely fine to use a reusable cup at a festival. But it would be really confusing if you gave them two options. So most places have actually just taken away the single use and everyone's got in a new habit. So there's lots of different elements that we need to focus on and lots of different levers that we can pull. But I still believe that, you know, most people understand that there is a global crisis in terms of waste, resource, plastic. Most people feel terrible when their bins are overflowing with plastic at home and actually would like us to provide solutions for them. It's just we've got to explain it to them in the right way.
And I think, like you say, it's sort of making it that attractive proposition for people, you know, and I think that comes back to the standardization. I think it's allowing for that consistent customer experience across multiple products. And I think obviously, you know, companies like Refill, this is the start of something that can hopefully scale up and allow that. Talking more generally now, how do you sort of evaluate the economic sort of potential of reuse?
So we have, I mean, within the trial, we have various KPIs that we need to meet. So we are looking at, you know, the percentage switch, the percentage of sales going through refill. So there's commercial indicators like that. Also looking at efficiencies throughout the supply chain. So using this model that we've got, actually really seeing where the costs and savings can be throughout the supply chain to really understand that. And then we have non-commercial KPIs as well. So operationally, you know, the kit can't fail, you know, and this is about finding the right balance between being too technologically led and too manual. You know, the more tech you put into a system, the more cost you put into it, and the more chance it has to fail. And if a customer has just got used to coming and refilling something, and then they can't refill it for a week because we're waiting for a technician to come from somewhere else to come and fix it, then that won't work.
You sort of touched on it earlier about, you know, when we reimagine supply chains and we have to rethink things. This brings me on to my next question about sort of jobs and that side of the economy and sort of upskilling. How do you evaluate the potential of reuse to sort of create new jobs, you know, new skills for people? Is there a lot of potential there too?
The possibility of job creation, I think, is huge when it comes to reuse, I guess, as part of a wider kind of green transition, because you've got really this new network of washing, logistics, reconditioning that can be set up. If you did a 30% reuse rate, which I guess is what a lot of the NGOs would like, a 30% reuse rate, fag packet calculation, it's something like 365 million items a week that need to be sold, used, returned, sent around a washing system and sent back to suppliers. Now, that's a huge piece of infrastructure change that we need. And on the one hand, that seems very, very complicated. On the other hand, I don't think it's that complicated. I think we know how to do all of the things. We know how to build warehouses. We have a very efficient logistics system. We know how to wash things safely. We do it in hospitals and restaurants all of the time. So I think we know how to design packaging. We've got a brilliant packaging industry in the UK and globally. So I think none of the individual parts of the system are difficult to do. I think it's how we turn the oil tankers of a single-use system and get everyone pointing in the same direction. And I do believe that that's where government can play a role in terms of what is the supportive regulation and legislation that we need to give business the confidence to invest in what this new infrastructure world looks like.
That actually brings me on to my next point nicely about sort of that huge infrastructure change. And as we know, like within sort of reusables and refillables, there's been a lot of experiments and pilots, and without sort of shared infrastructure and standardization, they are struggling to get off the ground. What do you evaluate? Sort of how do you evaluate the barriers to reuse?
So I think everybody has known that there is a problem. Everybody knows that reuse and refill are part of the solution. So what we've got to do is shift from this position we're in now, which is where everyone's done individual trials. And I actually think we're in a dangerous place, because I think everyone's losing faith because they've done a trial. They haven't necessarily done enough trials with enough products in enough locations. So the consumers aren't really engaged with it enough, because if it's only one trial in one store, then how do you extrapolate up how an entire sort of consumer base of a retailer might behave? The system change is really only going to come when you've got this sort of supportive regulatory framework around it to enable it. May include subsidies. We subsidize plenty of other things, so why we can't subsidize reuse and refill. And also, some of the businesses are going to have to change their approach. I think it's fair to say that brands are extremely wedded to their individualized packaging. It is their very expression of their brand and their being. So there will have to be a balance struck between what can be personalized by brands and what needs to be standardized. But if you think about it, we have so much standardization already. Every can that baked beans comes in is standardized. Lots of 33 centiliter bottles are standardized. Lots of liter bottles are. There are plenty of examples where brands thrive using standardized packaging formats, and it's about marketing, it's about labeling, it's about design, all these different ways that you can do it. And actually, I think we need more leadership from brands in this area to really work together and agree where they can compromise, what can be standardized. And there are already projects that are trying to do this, but I think those need to go a little bit further and faster.
So we need action at every level, just, from the individual action all the way to, international policy. This sort of brings me on to my next question about reuse targets. How do you evaluate the role of reuse targets in sort of moving things forward?
I am 100% supporter of reuse targets. The right targets for the right categories with the right transition phase and the right, support, I think will be the enabler rather than the blocker. So I think there's probably plenty of lobbyists from plenty of the big businesses fighting against targets. We have seen it very, very strongly with the PPWR amendments and change that's been happening in Europe. And you saw there was a huge fight back on behalf of various single-use packaging manufacturers and their clients in the food to go industry, playing some fairly dirty tactics, I'm going to call that out, using selective scientific data to support claims, et cetera, and it was a bit of a David and Goliath. There's a huge amount of vested interest in a single-use industry, and the reuse industry is tiny and disparate and hasn't necessarily got a collective voice yet, although there are various brilliant organisations like New Era trying to change this.
Catherine, explain more about the PPWR and what they do.
So the PPWR is the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, and it's the most recent sort of rounds of European negotiations that have been going on to really update that regulation. And there has been, I guess, quite a battle between NGOs and civil society who believe there should be more stringent regulation to reduce waste and to increase reuse. And then a fairly well-funded business lobby, certainly from the single-use packaging industry and the food-to-go industry, that have pushed back very heavily against targets. So it's as part of the sort of different levels of regulation that we're looking at. So the Global Treaty on Plastics, the PPWR in Europe, which is really seen as a standard bearer for a lot of other regulation that other countries are adopting. And then certainly in the UK, we've got DEFRA who are looking at what they might be doing on reuse too. So I think targets are the enabler, and many of the roundtables that I sit on with businesses, our clients, other businesses, not just in the UK, will privately sit in these roundtables and say, God, if only we had targets, we would be able to work on this. And yet we don't yet. So I think the PPWR has done great work in certain targets in terms of beverages, transit packaging, food to go. But I think it was a huge missed opportunity to tackle many of the sort of FMCG goods that, you know, an average consumer would take home in their basket. You know, we've got the Global Treaty on Plastics. I know the work that EMF is doing through the Business Coalition, which is just an absolutely brilliant way of getting businesses to work together to create this shared voice. So some days I feel quite hopeful in the sense that there are a lot of interests that are aligning, and there's a lot of consensus being built on the need for reuse and refill. Some days I feel less hopeful because I just feel like everything is taking too long. And actually we are running out of time to solve some of these problems.
As we've heard, the time for step-by-step progress has passed. We need to see action go further and faster to fully unlock the benefits of a reuse revolution. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Circular Economy Show. We're planning a mid-season Q&A episode, so if you have any burning questions for the team at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, drop us a line at podcast@emf.org, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can leave a comment in the Q&A section of our show notes. See you next time.